right, well, joining me on the line today is my good friend Trace Meyer. He is the proprietor of runtogold.com, and he is also one of the earliest Bitcoin adopters. In fact, we had him on the program several years ago where he was actually talking about Bitcoin way before the rest of the mainstream media finally caught on. Trace, it's great to have you back on the program. Thanks for coming.
Oh, great to be here. Glad to be back. Glad to talk with you guys, give a little bit of an update on where our magic internet money is.
Precisely. That's exactly what we want to do today. We want to talk about Bitcoin, the state of Bitcoin as we are here in Q2 of 2015. A lot has happened over the last since you've been on the program last. And many people are beginning to warm to Bitcoin, although it's probably just a matter of time. It's been one of these things where it's in the media. People are aware of what Bitcoin is now. At least they have a basic understanding of kind of what it is. And it seems as if people are beginning to slowly put down their defenses. Probably the folks who are least embracing Bitcoin, though, remain those people who are staunch gold bugs. And I think what's interesting about you, Trace, is that you are a gold bug. You run runtogold.com, and you are a strong believer in gold as insurance. But you also are very much a proponent of Bitcoin. Explain how you are able to hold both of these and what tensions there are in holding both of them.
Yeah, well, I think they're actually very complementary tools when it comes to money, currency, transferring value, economic calculation, defending individual rights, human rights, property rights. You know, I kind of came to this whole area through Dr. Edwin Vieira's magnum opus, his Pieces of Eight. You know, it's 1,700 pages. It's 5,500 legal citations. It's the magnum opus, the treatise on American monetary jurisprudence. And, of course, he discusses gold and silver in there because it's in our Constitution. It's just so critical for, standing as a defender of property rights against despotic inroads on the part of government because it vests the power of the purse with the individuals as opposed to with government. And so, I'm a huge gold bug in that sense. I run to gold, started writing about all these things clear back in early 2008, which was, about a year before Bitcoin even existed. And so, I came, when I came across Bitcoin, I was like, holy cow, this is such an advancement in terms of not just monetary science and theory, but also accounting. We have for the first time where the unit of account is also the payment system. Bitcoin Network merges these two things. It's both the blood and the veins. With gold, we have, gold is the blood, but in order to transfer it over distance, we have to use things like credit cards or wire transfers or gold certificates or, some other instrument to change the ledger. But with Bitcoin, we have this decentralized distributed ledger that everybody has access to and everybody comes to distributed consensus on because Bitcoin solved in computer networking what's called a Byzantine generals problem, this problem of distributed consensus. And so now we have a whole ability to do what's called programmable trust. We're able to build the way we establish trust on the internet. We're able to build that now right into the protocol of Bitcoin. And so this is something that gold is not able to do. Gold is limited in amount by atoms. It's on the periodic table. Bitcoin, in contrast, is limited in amount by numbers, by the cryptography or the mathematics. And so just like we mine gold, we're digging through lots of rocks. We're trying to find those particular atoms. So likewise with Bitcoin, we have the largest supercomputer in the world. In fact, if you took all of Google's data centers, it would be not even 1% of the Bitcoin network. And we use that giant supercomputer with the Bitcoin network to mine numbers. We're looking for these numbers that allow us to add a new block to the blockchain that includes all these transactions. And so Bitcoin is extensible. We're able to change it. We're able to update it. We're able to make it more useful. We're able to build out additional utility. That's one thing with gold. An ounce of gold today is the same as it was 2,000 years ago. It's going to be the same in another 2,000 years because it's defined scientifically through the chemistry on the periodic table. But Bitcoin is going to continue to change and be extensible. We're going to be able to continue building and making it more useful. So that's, very exciting. And, I hit on this distributed consensus aspect with the Byzantine generals problem. Well, Bitcoin is now the first practical implementation of triple entry bookkeeping. This is an application that comes out of the Bitcoin network that you can't have with gold. Like gold just can't do triple entry bookkeeping. The atoms don't really work that way. But the Bitcoins, they do work that way. So we now have this whole new way of doing accounting and balance sheets and corporate governance and immutable history. I mean, there's a project where they've taken 30,000 books that are in the Gutenberg library. They've taken the hash, which you can take a file, you can run it through an algorithm, you get a unique number. You can put that unique number into a Bitcoin transaction. It gets into the blockchain. Now you can prove with mathematical certainty that that book existed at that particular point in time. Well, you can do that with any type of data or information. You could prove ownership to yachts or houses or airplanes, to self-driving cars. All of these things, we can put it into the blockchain. We can put our history into the blockchain. Then you can't erase it. You can't change it. It becomes immutable, unchangeable. All of these are applications of Bitcoin that we don't get with gold itself. The other thing that I think really sets Bitcoin apart, which imagine we had a commodity that's like gold, except it's a limited amount, but let's say it's not shiny, you can't use it in electronics, you pretty much can't do anything with it, except for one thing. You can transfer that commodity over a communications channel. That means that you can reduce it to zeros and ones and send it over a fiber optic line, or you can send it through a radio wave or a microwave. You could somehow send it through a communications channel. Well, that's what Bitcoin is. It's really, it doesn't really have many other practical uses except you can reduce it down and send it over a communications channel. So now, just like in Star Trek where you could beam stuff up and down and everywhere, like now we can beam the gold from one location to another using Bitcoin as the communications channel.
Let me interject there, Trace, and I think that does bring up a very interesting point in the fact that in commodity money, you do have that what is known as intrinsic value. That does seem to be a problem, I guess, with some gold bugs. They look at Bitcoin and they think, well, now, here is, as you pointed out, nothing but zeros and ones. Now, it does serve as a store of value in the fact that you are able to use that as money. It does serve some of the functions of money, but that intrinsic value seems to be missing. How do you respond to that?
Well, I wrote an article about this because James Turk and I, we've been discussing Bitcoin for years, actually. Well, first, this idea of intrinsic value, we have to get at what we mean with it, because nothing has value in itself. We know that from subjective value theory. Things only have value because individuals place value on them. And so how I kind of get at intrinsic value is the item limited in amount by its internal characteristics, or is it limited in amount by external characteristics? Gold, for example, as talked about earlier, is limited by its atoms. Bitcoin is limited by the math or the cryptography. Federal Reserve notes or euros, those are limited in amount by anti-counterfeiting laws and Federal Reserve policy. But those are external characteristics. And so that's how I kind of distinguish between intrinsic value and extrinsic value. Are we trying to use chartalism? Are we trying to use the state to impute value to something, or does something have value because of its internal characteristics that then individual actors within the market choose to value the thing for?
My guest today is Trace Mayer. He is the proprietor of runtogold.com. That's where you can find him. Trace, last year in the Wall Street Journal, there was actually a debate at which former U.S. Treasury Secretary Larry Summers was debating the merits of Bitcoin, and this is a quote from what he had said. The people who rejected the Internet as a curiosity for scientists were on the wrong side of history. The people who rejected digital photography as really an artificial thing were on the wrong side of history. And the people who felt that non-gimmicky tennis rackets were made with wood were on the wrong side of history. So it seems to me that the people who confidently reject all the innovation here in the new blockchain-based payment and monetary systems with Bitcoin are on the wrong side of history. So is it time for the companies out there in America to wake up? Is this really digital Darwinism? Is it adapt or die? I mean, do you think that's where we are here, or do we still have plenty of time? Is this still building out and evolving slowly?
Our transition from the industrial age to the information age is going to happen in 40 to 50 years. We're already 20 years into it. From the agricultural to the industrial age took 500 years. It took several lifetimes. So the rate at which things are changing, it's just changing so much faster, and the rate at which it's changing is increasing. But when it comes to adapt or die, yeah, that's exactly what we have to do. Bitcoin's a new technology. Those companies, those countries that embrace the new technologies, they're going to be the ones that survive and thrive in the industrial age. In fact, just yesterday, April 18th, in New York City, Senator Rand Paul came and gave an address to the Bitcoin community. Rand Paul has become the first presidential candidate to begin accepting Bitcoin for political donations. And I actually got to ask him a question. And the question I asked him was, in the imitation game, we see the story of Alan Turing, who cracked the Enigma machine and saved approximately 14 million Allied lives in World War II. We've seen cryptography change the destiny of nations since the Caesar cipher was invented 2,000 years ago. Do you think that the regulation of the Bitcoin industry needs to be done properly so that we can keep the innovation that's happening in cryptography in the U.S. for U.S. national security reasons? And his response was, I'm not an expert on the technology or the cryptography, but it is a new technology, and I think it's very important to keep the innovation and the new technology, particularly in cryptography, in the United States for national security reasons. So this is a major U.S. presidential candidate realizing the importance that math plays in geopolitics. Because, we're in the information age now. No amount of violence is going to solve a math problem. And with Alan Turing, during World War II, one of the great lines in the Imitation Game movie is, who gave you the power to decide who lives and who dies? Who made you God? And he says, it's because I can do things that no one else can. And, when we're talking about math and cryptography, like, whoever's got the strongest math is going to win. That's one of the primary reasons the U.S. is so dominant, is because we've had the technology industry develop here in the U.S. We have the Facebooks and the Amazons and the Googles. Whether we like it or not, and how the NSA has tapped into that, we may disagree with it politically and the implications it has on our Fourth Amendment and things like that. And, I'm a big proponent of privacy with my How to Vanish website, but at the end of the day, when it comes to the geopolitics and the Machiavellian, the Prince way of dealing with the state, for U.S. national security interests, Bitcoin and cryptography is going to be vital. And Russia and China, they realize this too. And so, it's becoming an arms race, and it's an arms race of scientists and mathematicians and cryptography and these new internet protocols as we build out cyberspace.
It's a very interesting point, almost like the geopolitics of Bitcoin. Very interesting. The other thing I was going to ask you about is the consumer protection. It's interesting to see that former U.S. Treasury Secretary was commenting on Bitcoin in a favorable way there. I didn't know this about presidential candidate Rand Paul. He is actually eyes open on Bitcoin. So it seems as if it's coming of age. What else needs to come of age, I would think, is some sort of consumer protection like we have seen recently with Mt. Gox and, some of the other issues that have occurred. I think that also is probably stymieing the industry or causing people to fret over it. Do you think that's something that's going to be built out? Is that something the U.S. needs to lead as well?
Well, first, we have to understand with Bitcoin, you literally can hold the private keys yourself. The private keys, it's a number that enables you to solve the math problem to move the Bitcoins. It allows you to do something that no one else can. Even if they have a nuclear weapon, no amount of violence is going to solve a math problem. You either have that private key and can move the Bitcoins, or you can't. If you don't want to hold those private keys yourself and generate them yourself to make sure they're secure, you could outsource that to a third party. I do think that third parties that hold people's private keys to their wealth, in Bitcoin's case, banks, brokerage accounts, trustees, all of these people that are holding private keys to property rights, they need to be held to a very high standard of care. I've been actually very helpful to Brian Donegan with the Isle of Man government, and they recently passed legislation that went into effect April 1st of 2015 that now gives Bitcoin-specific regulations. So we're able to deal with cryptocurrencies in the Isle of Man, bring them into the financial institutions. They had two main prongs. One was to keep crime out. The other was to protect customer funds. We're seeing the same type of rumblings in New York, for example. Superintendent Ben Losky has been wrangling with the industry over this bit license, which will provide ways to hold customer funds safely, at least encourage the businesses to do that with legal power behind it. But yeah, it's very important, but I think people need to understand, just like you can hold a gold coin in yourself in your own hand or in a safe, so likewise you can hold the private keys to the Bitcoins yourself. You don't have to trust anyone. I mean, you need to be competent and hold them in a secure way, which is one of the reasons I funded the Armory Bitcoin wallet, which is by far the standard when it comes to securing Bitcoins. It's used by a lot of the major Bitcoin companies behind the scenes anyways. But yeah, it's free, open source. Anyone can download it. Secure your Bitcoins that way. And that's one of the reasons I funded it, was I wanted a tool that could stand like a silent sentinel so that you could demand delivery of your Bitcoins and know that you were securing them in a right way. And then, that prevents so many issues like bank runs and fractional reserve, et cetera, because it can stand as a silent sentinel and a check on all of that behavior by potentially either malicious or just incompetent actors.
You're referring to BitcoinArmory.com?
Yeah, BitcoinArmory.com is where you can go to get the software itself. And I have several podcast interviews, I think episode like 100 and 101 and 105, where I interview some of the senior developers at Armory, and we discuss, a lot of these terms like private keys and multi-signature and cold storage and, these terms that help you understand how to keep your Bitcoin secure.
You mentioned your podcast, Trace. How can people find that?
It's available at bitcoin.kn. It's the Bitcoin Knowledge Podcast. You can also search iTunes for Bitcoin. It's like the number 1 or 2 podcast that shows up in those results. And I interview all the top people in the Bitcoin space. So I interview CEOs of Bitcoin companies. And it's a Bitcoin industry now. We got so many different companies doing so many different things and applications that it's really kind of fun to see what everybody's working on and hear it straight from the horse's mouth, straight from the players who are the CEOs of these companies.
My guest today is Trace Mayer. He runs the podcast Bitcoin Knowledge. Is that what it's called?
Yep, that's what it's called. Bitcoin.kn is where you can find it.
Fantastic. One final question, Trace. We're looking here at a chart of Bitcoin prices. And, of course, we go back to the end of 2013 where the mania really just took off, straight up shot, and we ended up seeing Bitcoin well over $1,000. Certainly caught the mainstream media's attention. Since then, it's been locked in a fairly straightforward downtrend, really bottoming out in the final part of 2014, early 2015. It's kind of going sideways now. From a technical analysis perspective, it's just kind of locked in a sideways trend. Don't really expect you to be able to forecast where this thing is going to go, but I would ask you this, having been an investor in Bitcoin for a long time, to the average person out there listening, with Bitcoin prices currently at about, just slightly over $200 this morning, is now a good time to perhaps get exposure to Bitcoin, or do you think we could go lower from here? What are your thoughts?
Well, first, I think we're probably going to continue consolidating for a good period of time from here, maybe 6 to 8 months at least. But when you say, get exposure to Bitcoin, I'd like to illustrate that with a story. I have a friend that, I showed Bitcoin to him back when it was $5 a coin, and he had never bought any, and he watched it run to 1,000, and then he watched it it's at 220 now, down nearly 80%, and he's decided, I want to buy some Bitcoin. So he emails me because I'm like the three-eyed fish, right, that knows something about this thing. And he's like, I got $500,000 that I want to put into Bitcoin. And he happened to email me, I think, January 14th. And he's like, I want to buy it, right now because it's at $170. which is, might very well be the bottom. We don't know. But, he hadn't acquired the human capital to figure out how to keep his Bitcoin safe, how to engage in Bitcoin transactions safely, how to actually buy the Bitcoins. I mean, he hadn't done any of this homework. He hadn't prepared himself to be able to take advantage of that low price in Bitcoin. He hadn't acquired the human capital. I kind of sent back, I was like, well, you got to get competent in the technology. I mean, you learned how to send emails. You need to learn how to deal with Bitcoins if you think you're going to be investing in them. If he had, allocated that $500,000 into the Bitcoins like he wanted to in early January, today he'd be up something like $300,000. But he hadn't put in, a few hours learning how to secure his Bitcoin. So he didn't have the human capital to even make the decision or not. Because so often we say that luck is actually when opportunity meets preparation. He hadn't put in the preparation, but he had the opportunity. But he didn't get lucky, right, and have the $300,000 profit. So I think when you're talking about getting exposure to Bitcoin, I think everybody should figure out how to use the technology. Go set up an account with Circle and buy some Bitcoins through ACH with your bank account. If it's like $20 or $50, I mean, you spend that much on a movie, right? Like, learn how to send them around, learn how to store them. Then when the time comes, and it does make sense on the technical charts and the fundamental charts to buy some Bitcoins, you'll be in a position to do it. Just kind of along those lines, I think Coinbase, for example, they recently raised $75 million. They've raised a total of over $100 million. One of their investors is USAA. Think about it geopolitically. If we've got a potential currency crisis, a dollar collapse, if we've got, problems in that sphere, what do we want to do in order to maintain social order so that we don't have like a reign of terror when the French astronaut collapsed? So we don't have a problem like when the continental dollar collapsed with the Revolutionary War. Like, how do we keep social order, social cohesion? We need to have a transitionary vehicle. Bitcoin very well could be that transitionary vehicle. Who would we want to be able to buy Bitcoins really easily? Well, how about U.S. Service members and their families? So USAA, they've made this investment in Coinbase. They're probably going to make it really easy for U.S. military members to buy Bitcoins. Then if Bitcoins go crazy in terms of price, guess who's going to have that purchasing power? Yeah, U.S. military members and their family, because it was easy for them to buy it, and they've been able to help with that human capital acquisition for them. So I think it's very important for people to be properly positioned with themselves. Invest in your own knowledge, your own skills, your own ability. Then you have done the preparation so that you can take advantage of the opportunity when it comes. And, I do think that we're consolidating on the price. It's probably going to grind this way for a while, but the block reward is going to have from 25 Bitcoins every 10 minutes to 12.5 Bitcoins every 10 minutes in about a year. About 15 months. And that's going to restrict supply of Bitcoins that are available for sale. And if the transactional volumes continue to pick up, and they're at all-time highs, over 100,000 Bitcoin transactions every day are going on, and there's a huge OTC market, and people are using it for remittances, and people are using it to purchase things on Amazon, for example. This is a great example. You don't actually have to speculate on the price of Bitcoin. You could just buy Bitcoins from Circle, use a service called purse.io where you're able to import a wish list from Amazon, and you can set the discount you want. Last time I ordered something on Amazon, I got a 35% discount using purse.io only because I used Bitcoin instead of like my American Express that I get rewards points with. So, you can take advantage of a lot of Bitcoin's characteristics without being exposed to the Bitcoin price as a speculator. You can immediately start saving good amounts of money on Amazon, and pretty much everyone I know buys stuff on Amazon might as well get a 20-30% discount. They've done over 10,000 transactions. The average discount's 18%. That's significant savings. So you can at least start saving money right now. Take that 18%, just buy some Bitcoins and sit on them. Great way to speculate. Didn't actually cost you any additional money.
Trace, we started selling some of our services in Bitcoin in addition to U.S. dollars, and we have been very surprised at the number of Bitcoin transactions that have been occurring. It's not a tremendous amount versus the regular purchase, but it is interesting to see that there is a demand out there for merchants to accept Bitcoin, and we're certainly seeing that here.
Yeah, kind of on that point, and I think that's an important point to make, is, Bitcoin's doing about 100,000 transactions per day. I was talking with someone who's at First Data, which is one of the large merchant processors. First Data does 100,000 transactions a second. People should keep in mind, Bitcoin is very speculative, still kind of proof of concept. It's a new technology. It's getting proven. It's getting battle-hardened, battle-tested. But at the end of the day, it is absolutely tiny right now. And if it were actually to be adopted and used in a lot of corporate America and uses, which, by the way, I think that institutional adoption of Bitcoin is a foregone conclusion. I agree with Dr. Balaji Srinivasan, the CEO of 21 Inc. And 21 Inc. is a Bitcoin startup that recently raised $116 million. And he recently said last weekend that institutional acceptance of Bitcoin is a foregone conclusion. It will happen. I agree with him. And so, now's the time to get a hold of some of them. Now's the time to learn the tech. You can always come in later, but you're going to be coming in most likely at a much higher price.
My guest today has been Trace Mayer. He is also the author of a free ebook that's available on our website, The Bitcoin Beginner's Guide. Fantastic little way to familiarize yourself with Bitcoin terminology, the technology, especially if you're brand new to the whole concept. Trace, thank you so much for joining us on Follow the Money.
Oh, glad to be with you, Jerry, anytime.